Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Opposition leaders in the prairie provinces are calling on more financial help for farmers during the pandemic. Ottawa announced over $2 billion to support municipalities. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman discusses how much of that is coming to our city. And 4 astronauts from the US, France, and Japan blasted off. We will tell you where they're headed.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Opposition leaders in the prairie provinces are calling on their provincial governments to increase support for farmers suffering during the COVID-19 pandemic. The NDP leaders want Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba to resume negotiations with Ottawa over the Agri-Stability Fund. The provinces came to a partial agreement last month to change the program that protects farmers from large declines in income, but they refused to provide funding to increase the compensation rate from 70% to 80%. Ottawa will continue to pay 60% of the total costs, and opposition leaders say the cost of changing the rate would be negligible. A bill has received royal assent at the Alberta Legislature, which will help to modernize irrigation in our province. Alberta Agriculture Minister Devin Dreeshen says Bill 54 will help to finalize an $815 million investment. Dreeshen says it will not only help with irrigation, but will also help pave the way for more agriculture investments across the province.
It allows for the historic $815 million announcement that we had last year of expanding irrigation in the province. About 200,000 more acres is going to be irrigated. And when all these projects are completed, it's going to be about $430 million in GDP that annually that'll be added due to all the new economic activity, about 8,000 new jobs, and really just a big economic boost for our ag sector, and also attract value-added processors from around the world to southern Alberta and across the province.
The Alberta government also announced today that after hearing from close to 25,000 Albertans in a recent online survey, coal exploration will be halted on Category 2 lands in the Alberta Rockies. Energy Minister Sonia Savage says affected companies have indicated that they will cooperate with the pause.
The suspension will stay in place at a minimum until public engagement is completed, at which point the results of the consultation will dictate the next steps. My office has been in contact with the affected companies, and I'm pleased to say that they've indicated their intent to cooperate with the halting of exploration activities. I also want to thank Albertans for making their voices heard. The decision is based on your input and the preliminary survey results.
Alberta's introduced a bill that would give legal protection to healthcare workers, including long-term care home operators facing lawsuits over COVID-19. The UCP says the legislation would prevent lawsuits unless it's for gross negligence, which is much harder to prove. The proposed law would be retroactive to March 1st of last year, around the same time the pandemic began. The opposition NDP says there have been appalling outbreaks at care facilities and suggests Premier Jason Kenney is taking fundamental fairness away from grieving families. With a recent federal budget, municipalities can expect around $2.2 billion worth of support. We asked Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman how much of that $2.2 billion will actually make its way here to our city.
Well, we're going to get 13 million of that. It's reasonable for a city of our size. They're specifically going to fund things like fiber optic in the industrial park, $5.5 million. We're getting funded for 10 projects, and all those 10 projects will help provide employment and recovery from the COVID pandemic situation.
Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman will also offer an update as to how Lethbridge is addressing the homeless problem in our city. That interview is coming up later in our program. It is National Volunteer Week, a week each year that recognizes local volunteers. Now, there's one specific program that has gone above and beyond during the pandemic. It is called Keep in Touch. Volunteers are connected with isolated seniors. As Ainsley O'Reilly explains, the program has received a lot of interest across the province.
In just 1 year, the Keep in Touch program has connected 83 seniors with over 1,000 hours of meaningful phone conversations. Both volunteers and organizers say that even a quick phone call once a week can be life-changing for these seniors.
They're the most meaningful person in my life right now. Another comment that they have made is my week begins with my volunteer's phone call. one participant said she's like a daughter to me. So it's really powerful statements.
They're like, oh, hello, Allison. I've been waiting for you to call. You know, it's just really refreshing. It's just heartwarming that they're expecting my call and they enjoy it. And I enjoy speaking with them just as much.
The program, through Volunteer Lethbridge, has 94 volunteer and senior pairs who correspond weekly.
Heartwarming for me to know that I can that I'm going to be phoning somebody, and it gives me a boost as well.
The program is working on expanding into rural southern Alberta and has also garnered interest from all over the province as far as Grand Prairie. Seniors have felt loneliness and isolation, but stay-at-home orders have exposed this issue further. The volunteer program hopes to alleviate this stress on our community's most vulnerable.
It really brings to light the issues of mental health and how the community, people in the community, are working with each other.
We're all important, and all the participants value our calls.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
It is no secret that the COVID-19 pandemic has taken a mental health toll on many of us. Psychologists, counselors, and even pastors are dealing with a huge influx of people who need help navigating their way through these dark times. Pastor Joel Klemick with Mid-City Church here in Lethbridge offers some insight on how to deal with COVID-19 depression and anxiety.
Often depression wants us to be totally consumed with it. Anxiety is similar. It just wants us to be totally consumed by the sense of threat or danger or worry or despair. And we need to redirect our attention to something helpful. It can begin with prayer, just very simply knowing we have a promise in Scripture that Jesus is big enough to handle our concerns, and we can bring any of them and all of them to him. And so he's trustworthy there. And so we get to test his trustworthiness by offering them to him and seeing what he does in them.
Students from school divisions within Lethbridge submitted works of art last year as part of Arts Alive and Well in Our Homes. Now this year, the program is called Virtually Installed Lethbridge School Students Art. It'll be moved to an online format. Kathy Connelson is the art show coordinator, and she says the beautiful artwork from last year is featured on the construction fencing around the Nikayuko Cultural Facility.
And so then to partner with Allied Arts Council and the City of Lethbridge to put these onto the screens in front of construction zones has just been so incredible to give the visibility, the artwork, the kids' creativity. It's been so wonderful, and I'm just so thrilled to be able to be a part of this. This is such a wonderful opportunity, not only to move the whole thing online. We found that a lot of people came to the art gallery, which was wonderful, but more and more people are being able to access online and see the artwork.
This year's event will run from May 3rd until the 31st. Moving on to post-secondary schooling can be a daunting task, but for 4 young athletes from Chinook High School in Lethbridge, they're doing so just as they make the leap to further their careers in sports. Micah Quinn has the details.
Pens are being put to paper, and 4 Chinook High School students are moving on from high school to enter the big times and university sports careers. Brantley Saar has been wrestling since he was in grade 8, and now he's joining the University of Calgary youth sports program. Saar says that he's excited to join the Dinos team, even though he hasn't faced another wrestler in a year due to the pandemic.
It's been a lot of just working on anything I can by myself, and just there's been a couple virtual camps that I've attended to try and just get something out of it. But yeah, it's definitely tough when you can't do a contact sport.
Angelina Ellis-Toddington will be joining Saar at the UFC for wrestling as well. She says that it was the first place she wanted to go for university.
They have the best woman in the country, and it's super exciting. I started wrestling around grade 4, mostly with my siblings because there wasn't really any other elementary kids. And then it started more in grade 6 and kind of just picked up every year from there.
TL Hagel will be making her way to Brandon University to play volleyball for the youth sports program. And she says that the sport of volleyball was instilled into her at a young age.
My parents both played volleyball for a really long time. Like ever since I was really little, I've always been at the gyms and, you know, catching balls for my parents when they were serving and stuff like that. So yeah, I started really young, and volleyball's my entire life. I don't know who I'd be without volleyball. It's taught me so many life lessons, teamwork, you know, how to work hard, how to persevere. And so I just can't even thank volleyball enough for all it's done for me in my life.
Abby Froome rounds out the list of athletes from Chinook High School, and she'll be going to the Marion University Sports Program in Wisconsin, where she will be playing golf. Froome says that her strongest skill set in golf is her driver shot, where she can launch the ball up to 250 yards.
I've been keeping track of the scores with the girls that I'll be playing with, and I seem to be already in that area, so I feel like I shouldn't lack the skills.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
As the days start to get warmer, many campers are itching to warm up their RVs for weekend getaways and even staycations. We spoke with the staff at Bridgeview RV Resort here in Lethbridge to hear what COVID-19 precautions they're taking to keep everyone safe.
What we're asking people is to come with your own household and stay with your household. Have your staycation and have a good time doing that, but just keep it small and keep it simple. We're asking people to wear their masks when they're coming into our public areas, such as our laundry room and bathrooms and our office areas. Our staff are also being trained to deal with COVID. We're asking them not to come to work when they're sick, and they're doing a lot of extra cleaning to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Our showers are closed to the public due to COVID. Our pool will probably be open later this season than normal just because of where we are in our phases. We're in phase 1. Last year we were not allowed to open until we hit phase 2, and we're expecting the same this year as well.
The Saskatchewan Health Authority is looking for ways to deal with an increasing need for more intensive care beds. Officials say COVID-19 variants have put incredible stresses on hospitals, in particular in Regina. The Health Authority has already increased ICU capacity province-wide by 38 beds for a total of 117. Officials say patients are being doubled up in intensive care rooms in Regina, and some may be relocated to other cities. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister says his government has no plans to follow Ontario's lead and bring in paid sick leave for employees. Health experts say that paid sick leave is crucial to reducing the spread of COVID-19. Pallister says paid sick leave should be the federal government's responsibility. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says his government will bring in the program because people forced into quarantine should not have to worry about their jobs or loss of income. The Manitoba government has announced a program to improve provincial parks. The province will put $20 million into what it's calling the Provincial Parks Endowment Fund. Officials say the fund should generate around $1 million per year for the park system, and the fund will be managed by the Winnipeg Foundation and will be used to pay for trails, boardwalks, restoring habitat, and enhancing playgrounds, campgrounds, and maintaining roads.
This fund is designed to preserve and enhance and modernize our provincial parks for the future. And that endowment fund is going to focus on the sustainability and long-term viability of our provincial park system while enhancing the visitor experience that we have.
Toronto's mayor says he remains angry and saddened 3 years after a man killed 10 people and injured 16 others in a driving rampage. John Tory says the city will never forget the victims and vowed to gather each year to honor their memories.
Thank you for joining us today for an important commemoration of the Yonge Street tragedy, which represents a dark chapter in our city's history. More importantly, it's an opportunity for us to pay tribute to those we lost, those who suffered trauma in their lives that day, and those who served on that day. Today we are marking 3 years since the Yonge Street tragedy shocked our city. Along with every Toronto resident, I'm sure, I remember April 23rd, 2018, so vividly in all of its horror. Our entire city was rocked and saddened by the heinous act of violence that took place right in the heart of North York. There was a terrible loss of life that day. There were life-changing injuries, and there was a loss of innocence for our city.
Health experts in Oregon said federal officials are investigating the death of a woman in her 50s who developed a blood clot and low platelets within 2 weeks of receiving the Johnson & Johnson vaccine against COVID-19.
I'm not able to reveal the exact length of hospitalization because that could lead to identifiable information. However, I can share that her symptoms did present within 2 weeks of vaccination, so it's consistent with the cases observed before hers. We expect the CDC to identify and kind of comment on some of the remaining tests that were remaining at the time of our last discussion. In addition to that, it might be about a week or later before they're able to conclusively decide on the cause of death for any of the individuals outlined so far. I don't have information regarding other cases. We're just reporting the one death that we were made aware of. Fortunately, the treatment did occur in the wake of the announcement of the pause, so the appropriate treatment was undertaken and heparin was avoided for the treatment of this patient's symptoms.
That leads into our poll question on our website this week. Will you be getting your COVID-19 vaccine shot? A number of you voted, and close to 66% of you said no. 18% of you were undecided, and around 16% said yes. Our new poll question will be up on the Bridge City News website, bridgecitynews.ca, on Monday. Make sure you log on and vote, and we'll have those results for you again next Friday. SpaceX launched 4 astronauts into orbit today using a recycled rocket and capsule. The astronauts from the US, Japan, and France should reach the International Space Station by early Saturday morning.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff. Godspeed, Endeavour, and Crew 2.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Always love watching the rockets blast off. It is so cool. It was on this day that William Shakespeare was born. American civil rights activist Cesar Chavez dies at the age of 66. And Hank Aaron begins the climb of the throne to become the home run king in Major League Baseball. This is Today in History for April the 23rd.
April 23rd, 1564.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
William Shakespeare is believed to have been born on this day in Stratford-upon-Avon, England. The poet and dramatist known as the Bard, one of the greats in world literature, dies on the same day 52 years later. 1998, James Earl Ray, confessed assassin of Martin Luther King Jr., dies at a Nashville hospital at age 70. Once behind bars, Ray later insisted he had been framed, alleging a conspiracy behind the killing of the civil rights leader. 1993.
We're going to go to the public and ask him not to eat grapes.
Labor leader Cesar Chavez dies in Arizona at age 66. Chavez, who organized migrant farm workers, led boycotts and strikes to secure bargaining agreements with growers. And 1954. Hank Aaron, with what's then the Milwaukee Braves, begins his long climb to becoming baseball's home run king. Aaron hits the first of 755 career home runs during a game against the St. Louis Cardinals. The Braves win that game 7-5. Today in History, April 23rd. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
There are Christians in Russia who are praying for us here in the West, especially in Canada and the United States. According to Michael Johnson, who's president of the Slavic Gospel Association in the U.S., many fellow believers in Russia feel we have it tougher than they do because our busyness takes time away from God.
The Russian Christians would always say to me, Michael, we pray for you in America because we know how much more difficult it is to be a Christian in America because of all the distractions that you have. You know, it's like your jobs are more important than your families. And so sometimes because, you know, the kids grow up and one goes to the east, the other goes to the west, and they just don't have that kind of social mobility. And they always say to me, listen, you know, you just have so much and we have so little, but that gives us an opportunity to do what God has called us to do.
Catch the full interview with Michael Johnson from the Slavic Gospel Association and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our broadcast. Well, it was good to see the sunshine again today, wasn't it? Unfortunately, more clouds and a chance of the white stuff may be developing across southwestern Alberta this weekend. A complete look at the weather forecast is coming up. We had sunshine mixed with clouds today and fairly cool. Tonight, a good chance of snow developing with a low near -2. Saturday, snow mixed with rain and a high of 5 degrees. More flurries expected on Sunday with a high reaching 6. A high-pressure system returns on Monday, clearing out the clouds, and it should warm up to 14 degrees. Tuesday, slightly cooler with a high of only 9. Wednesday, the mercury will climb again to 17, and it'll feel like summer on Thursday with a high expected near 20. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 15 and an average low of +1. The highest temperature in the state was recorded in 1962 at 25 degrees, and the record low was -18 in 1967. The sun rose at 6:23 and it will set at 8:36. Looking at the national forecast for tomorrow now, expect rain and 11 at Victoria, BC. A few showers and 10 is on tap for Vancouver. Expect light snow and +1 in Calgary on Saturday. It should be mainly sunny and 7 in Edmonton. A mixture of sun and cloud and 8 degrees in Regina. Just a few clouds and 6 for Saskatoon. Lots of sunshine and 7 is on tap for Winnipeg tomorrow. It should be mainly sunny and 16 in Toronto. A chance of showers and 20 for Ottawa. Mainly sunny and 19 in Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, expect lots of sunshine and 15 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Partly cloudy and 14 degrees in Halifax, Nova Scotia. A few clouds and 11 degrees for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect clouds, showers, and a high of 9 degrees on Saturday. The Canada Energy Regulator says Canadian crude by rail exports plunged in February. It was due in large part to the impact of frigid temperatures on U.S. refineries. The regulator says lower oil production and strong prices in Canada compared to the United States benchmarks also contributed to the 43% drop in shipments over January. It says a total of 111,900 barrels per day were exported by rail in February. That is down from almost 196,000 in January. The CER says total oil exports from Canada in February compared to January were down 3.88 to 3.72 million barrels per day. Saskatchewan's canola crushing capacity keeps on growing. Agribusiness giant Cargill says it will build a 1 million ton per year crushing plant in Regina next year, with plans to be fully operational by early 2024. Along with construction jobs, the $350 million project is expected to create around 50 full-time positions. The Cargill announcement comes 1 month after Richardson announced it would double the capacity of its canola processing facility in Yorkton. American Express saw its first quarter profits rise sharply to $2.24 billion US. That compares with a profit of $367 million in the same period a year earlier. Revenues, however, were down 12% from a year-over-year adjusted basis to just over $9 billion as fewer customers used their credit cards and those with balances paid down their debt. German car company Daimler says its profits for the first 3 months this year rebounded to the equivalent of $6.6 billion Canadian. The company says global economic recovery and the demand for its luxury vehicles in China flattened the bottom line. Daimler also raised its outlook for an important measure of profitability this year. It says it now expects a profit of 10 to 12% on sales of its Mercedes-Benz cars. That is up from an outlook of 8 to 10% in its last estimate. More than 100 new Boeing 737 MAX jetliners remain grounded due to electrical problems. Airlines are waiting for Boeing to come up with a plan to repair the planes. The Federal Aviation Administration says it has notified other aviation regulators and airlines that it is working with Boeing to address the problem with electrical grounding and a backup power control unit. The FAA says the issue affects around 106 planes around the world. Southwest Airlines, Boeing's biggest customer, says 32 of its 64 MAX jets are currently out of service. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 70 points on the day to finish at 19,102. The Dow was up 227 to 34,043. The S&P 500 was up 45 points to 4180, and the Nasdaq was up 198 points on the day to 14,017. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 64 cents to 62.07 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 3 cents to 272 US. Gold was down 674 to 1777.20 US an ounce, and silver was down 14 cents to 26.01 US an ounce. Wheat is at $329 per metric ton, barley's at $339, canola's at $824, and corn is at $381 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 48 cents to $117.85. Feeder cattle were up $1.60 to $133.85, and lean hogs were up $1.90 to $109.35. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 80.16 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta has introduced a bill that would give legal protection to health workers, including long-term care home operators facing lawsuits over COVID-19. The UCP says the legislation would prevent lawsuits unless it is for gross negligence, which is much harder to prove. The proposed law would be retroactive to March 1st of last year, around the same time the pandemic began. Homelessness is a real issue in many cities in Canada, including our very own. Coming up, an interview with Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman, who discusses what's being done in our city to help the less fortunate. That Q&A is on deck. We are joined once again by Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman to discuss some of the current issues which are taking place in our fine city of Lethbridge. Welcome back to BCN, Mayor.
I'm happy to be here, Hal. Great to chat.
Now let's start off talking about a rumor which is circulating around the Windy City here, a rumor that you'd like to put to bed once and for all, is that after you step down as mayor of our city, you would be looking into pursuing the nomination for the NDP for Lethbridge East. Now you say there's no truth to that whatsoever.
There is absolutely no truth to that rumor. I'm not even a member of the NDP party, and I have no interest in pursuing the candidacy in Lethbridge East.
Now, when the municipal election rolls around in October, have you thought about who you may be throwing your support behind? Any of the candidates who've come forward so far?
No, I haven't thought about that, and at this point, I'm neutral.
Now, let's talk about some of the biggest challenges you've faced as mayor of Lethbridge. I mean, we've had the opioid crisis, obviously with COVID-19. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced since you've been mayor in our city?
Well, certainly the social issues. That's not what I intended to have to deal with. I thought I had a very good background in the private sector before becoming mayor. I was active in economic development, Lethbridge, the Chamber of Commerce. I'd served on the Catholic School Board for 18 years. I had past elected experience, if you like, and I thought working with the provincial government and providing a stronger economic base for the city is something I could work on and excel at. And there have been some great projects. The Cavendish investment, acquiring ownership of the airport, building the biggest recreational center in the city's history. We've had some significant successes in those areas, but the social issues have been a significant challenge.
Yeah, you know, you do talk about the successes, but let's talk about some of the challenges. What were some of the challenges that you faced, and maybe some advice you'd give to our next mayor?
Well, certainly with the supervised consumption site, that certainly got a lot of attention. And what we were trying to do there is get all kinds of supports. We talked about the 4 pillars. We wanted more emphasis on education and prevention. We wanted more support for our police in terms of having provincial resources to shut down drug houses. We wanted to have treatment and recovery facilities. So we wanted all those pillars in addition to the supervised consumption. We thought, well, at least we had one. And if we have regular contact with the people who are suffering from addiction, we could refer them to other services. But we never got the other supports in place, and that was a huge frustration.
Now, were you surprised to hear that Naheed Nenshi, the mayor of Calgary, will not be seeking re-election this fall? You've been in contact with him quite a bit, especially when it comes to EMS dispatch.
Yep. Actually, the mayors get together and talk a lot. We were quite a few of us have been talking about our futures for the last 6 months, and Mayor Nenshi was undecided, and then he's come out a couple of weeks ago and declared his intentions. But I wasn't surprised. The mayor of Edmonton has also declined to run. Myself, so there are quite a few mayors that aren't running, and it can be time for new blood.
Now, what are your thoughts on the recent federal budget? Ottawa announced $2.2 billion going towards municipalities. How will this really impact Lethbridge here?
We're going to get 13 million of that. It's reasonable for a city of our size. They're specifically going to fund things like fiber optic in the industrial park, $5.5 million. We're getting funded for 10 projects, and all those 10 projects will help provide employment and recovery from the COVID pandemic situation.
We're in the industrial area, so that'll probably help us out here as well with the Bridge City News and the Miracle Channel. Now, how is Lethbridge doing with COVID-19 and the battle at this point in time? Council recently said, you know, we're going to extend the face covering bylaw until the end of the year, which is almost kind of redundant, I guess, because we currently have the provincial legislation in place as well. But where do you see us headed over the next month or two? Do you think maybe further restrictions will be put in place here in our city?
We'll have to monitor and see how the situation unfolds. But certainly, it's a concern. Our numbers, we had the highest numbers per 100,000 just a few weeks ago. I was very concerned whenever the numbers went over 200. When they went over 500, that's a real concern. And we're in the high 400s right now, about 470, 480. In my discussions with Alberta Health Services, those numbers are really the tip of the iceberg. The situation everywhere across the province is much worse than the numbers that are being reported. They're only the numbers that have tested positive. In some cases, frequently, when someone in a household tests positive, the others don't go for testing. And that's a real concern. We need to make sure that we have a handle on the situation. I thought we did the right thing in the fall. Last August, when we passed the face covering bylaw, we had one in place here in the month of October and November when the provincial numbers were spiraling. Ours were not at that point. The province didn't put in a face covering bylaw or order, a health order, until December the 7th. So I have no comfort in relying on the province to put in the appropriate orders. I met a couple of weeks ago with our premier and talked about the high numbers in Lethbridge when we had the highest rates in the province, and we didn't get any supports. And if we, again, were in the situation where our numbers were much higher than the province, I'm not confident that we would get the supports that we would need specifically for Lethbridge if that wasn't occurring across the province.
Why do you think our numbers are actually higher than other municipalities of comparable size? Why are they so much higher here in Lethbridge?
Why were they? Because the others are caught up now. But the reasons that have been provided by Alberta Health Services, and I believe them, are that there have been inappropriate social gatherings, inappropriate family gatherings which violate the health orders, and there have been situations in certain faith communities which also violated the health orders, even here in the South. So we need to make sure that everybody's following the health orders. I know it's frustrating. We need to be patient for a little while longer, keep each other safe. It's really the most important thing. Follow the health orders, get the vaccinations, and hopefully we'll get past this. That's the most important thing to do. We can't let these numbers get out of control and put people at risk.
Does the city have any predictions when it comes to the possibility of some of the larger summer events taking place, including Whoop Up Days?
We can't at this time. We have to get past the vaccination stage, and we have to be confident that we've got the situation under control. It would be irresponsible for me to say that Whoop Up Days are going ahead when I have no idea where the numbers are going to go from here today and what level of support and compliance we will get from the community.
With city restaurants and eateries getting hit very hard once again with another round of restrictions, I mean, so many business owners I've talked to, Mayor Spearman, say, you know what, we're dying in. We cannot keep doing this curbside pickup and delivery. It's killing us. How has the response been from the city so far, offering grants to maybe help them set up outdoors for maybe more outdoor dining experiences?
It's been very strong. So this past week, City Council approved citywide patios and parkades. So to support those restaurants as best we can. In my consultations with the restaurants and small businesses, what they've been telling me is they need higher levels of provincial support. So right now it's capped at $20,000. They said it needs to be at least double that for them to survive. And so I think there's a role for the provincial government to play as well. I think they need to provide additional financial supports to our restaurants and small businesses.
And, you know, hopefully we can open up the theaters a little bit more as well. We keep hearing from Len Binning from the Movie Mill here in Lethbridge saying, you know what, we can physically distance maybe every third or fourth seat. People are facing forward with a mask. Why can't we open? He says this is ridiculous, and it's really hurting his business as well. Now, let's talk about the Lethbridge Police Department for just a moment here. They submitted their action plan, Chief Shaheen Medizadeh, to the province as to how to improve transparency and accountability. What are your thoughts on what needs to happen moving forward with our police?
Well, I think it's a solid plan. It involves training. It involves commitment from our police officers. And I agree with the chief. I think the vast majority of our officers are committed. They're professional. But there may need to be some changes, and they have to address some of the cultural issues that have caused the things that have drawn national attention. I think what has to happen is, in the end, our citizens have to have full confidence in our Lethbridge Police Services, and I believe that our new chief is well on the way to achieving that.
Now, the city is going to take about 6 months or so to devise a new monuments policy. Mayor Spearman, can you share a bit about what that is?
Well, I think it's about how we go about creating monuments and what are the things that we celebrate. So we need to involve community consultation, and the way things were done 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Society's changed. There are different things we've seen in other communities where statues have been taken down and monuments have been taken down because beliefs have changed, and there were some levels of insensitivity associated with some of those things. And we just have to make sure that we're doing everything that our current society expects of us.
City Council unanimously approved the development of a community well-being and safety task force. Can you explain what kinds of representatives will be part of this and how this could potentially improve some of our social behavior challenges we've seen over the last few years?
So really it is asking the community to help us. And so this is going to go beyond the mandate of this council, I believe, but it's going to be a community-based response. So based on the public hearings from a couple of weeks ago, the mustard seed, we saw how that went. And I did ask people who presented and say, well, would you like to be part of the solution? And many of them said yes. So we will include businesses. We will include and invite the people who spoke at the public hearing. And that will involve organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, like the Downtown BRZ. We'll involve faith groups who were also very proactive during the public hearings. And we'll involve members of the Indigenous community, and we want to have a broad cross-section. We want to have people there with lived experiences, people who have had addiction and recovered from addiction. So we want to address those social issues that we have in the city. There's many people that are complaining about crime and the issues we've had with drug-related crime, and they think that the solution is just to fund the police for more. And I say that's simply a whack-a-mole philosophy. People who are committing crimes are not doing it out in the open. They're deliberately deceptive so that to minimize the chances of getting caught. What we have to do is eliminate the root causes. And the root causes of addiction are things like homelessness, joblessness, people who have no hope. I would walk around the city in the summertime and ask people why they were addicted, why they were on drugs, and they would say, because my life on drugs is better than my life off of drugs. So we need to make sure that those people have hope, that they're given treatment, and that we provide for that in the city of Lethbridge, and we provide for meaningful daily activity. We need to provide them with skills. So homes, skills, ultimately jobs, we hope, and make them contributing members of society. So that's a big challenge. It won't work for everybody. And there are some people who we know we will never be able to help, but those people need to be in permanent supported housing. And I'm very concerned that those things won't happen. So we'll try a community-based approach, and we'll hopefully have people contributing to that solution. We received $11 million in funding for a supported housing facility 2 years ago, and we haven't started construction yet. So I hope that we can use the available money and start creating solutions in Lethbridge.
So Mayor Spearman, let's talk about the homeless issue here in our city in Lethbridge. I mean, thank God for organizations like Streets Alive, help a lot of the people who are homeless right now, providing food and shelter. We've got the Interfaith Food Bank, we've got the Lethbridge Food Bank, a lot of church groups as well. But what specifically is the city doing to address the issue of homelessness here in Lethbridge?
Well, what we're trying to do is advocate for provincial funding supports, and we have done that successfully in terms of the supported housing money that has been granted. But what we need to do is create unity in the city so that when we're advocating for supports, that there aren't protests when funds are granted. So we need to make sure that the community understands you can't put a recovery facility, for example, right next to the shelter and a supervised consumption site. So people who are in a recovery facility won't recover if they have ready access to supervised consumption. So we need to spread out those services, and we have to be accepting of having them in neighborhoods so people can recover, where they can access services and have some faith in the process.
I was just going to ask you, Mayor Spearman, let's talk now about some of the sports franchises that have been really hurting during the pandemic and the lockdown, specifically the Lethbridge Hurricanes. What's the city doing to really address the money shortage, the revenue shortage, and to help them succeed right now and into the future?
Well, what we did last year and what we're considering doing this year is basically waiving or minimizing the payments on the use of the NMAX Center. So what we're trying to do is extend the contract and say, okay, this year doesn't count, and when you resume a full season, then you will pay the appropriate rent. But where they have no revenue coming in, we're certainly prepared to be flexible in order to keep the team viable.
Absolutely, real challenge, not having the fans there and not selling the merchandise as well. And of course the concession, right? The popcorn and pop and so forth. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. Look forward to speaking to you at the end of May.
The COVID pandemic has been such a downer for most people, yet there are some silver linings in that cloud. Joining us via Zoom from outside of Rockford, Illinois to chat about this is Michael Johnson, the president of the U.S. Office of the Slavic Gospel Association. Welcome, Michael. So glad to have you with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So first of all, can you tell us what the Slavic Gospel Association is all about?
Well, the Slavic Gospel Association is one of the oldest ministries in North America that is specifically focused on ministering to the people in the former Soviet countries, specifically the Russian-speaking populations. So we were established in 1934 and by a Russian immigrant by the name of Peter Danica, who came here in the early 20th century. His family sent him to America to get a job so he could send money back so that the family could survive in what was a famine that existed in Belarus at the time. So he came to faith in Christ and through the ministry of the Moody Church in Chicago. And in 1934, the Lord gave him a vision to start this ministry. So the main focus of the ministry back then was the covert distribution of books and Bibles to the Russians, many of whom were living underground during the years under communism. But also we developed a radio ministry where we were broadcasting Christian radio programming into those countries 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that was it started around the time when the Soviet government decided that they wanted to declare atheism across all those nations and put the last Bible under glass in a museum in Moscow. So this ministry in many ways kept the gospel open to the people as they would, listen to shortwave radio in their attics and in their cellars. When the wall came down, we connected with the largest group of evangelical churches in those countries, the Baptist churches. And we responded to their priorities. The first being to training. So we established a number of seminaries and Bible institutes that we continue to support to this day. We sponsor about 350 national church planting missionary families that are working in previously unreached towns and villages. And to the broader group of churches, we're connected with almost 6,000 churches across those countries. We provide funds for them to minister to people in need through our compassion ministries, to orphans, to families in crisis. We support children's camps, Christmas celebrations, essentially to equip them with the resources that they need to reach out to their communities.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, obviously in 2020, 2021, a huge pandemic happening. So I understand that the COVID pandemic, with all its problems and challenges, has somehow opened up doors of opportunity to share Christianity with the people of the former Soviet Union. So maybe different ways. So can you explain maybe what's been happening this past year?
Well, I believe that the COVID pandemic represents the greatest opportunity for the proclamation of the gospel in those countries since the wall came down 30 years ago. And so what we did in partnership with the churches, we started a worldwide prayer campaign that we call Christ Over COVID, Much Prayer, Much Power. And so we're connected with thousands and thousands of people all over the world who are praying on a regular basis for those churches and for the Christians in Russia and for the countries in the former Soviet Union, that people might be open to the gospel. And then we started raising funds, and we identified 800 churches throughout those nations that were in strategic locations. And we started transferring funds to them so that they could go into their markets and purchase food and put together food packets that would last a family of 4, maybe a week to 10 days. And then they would go to the local governments and get the lists of people that were really struggling. Because again, there's not a safety net in those countries like we have in our countries. And so once you lose your job, you lose access to funds, you can't feed your family. And so they just went out and started knocking on doors and blessing people. And we had roughly 80,000 encounters that we counted, and it just continues to grow. And so it was an opportunity for the churches to connect with people that were in need and share, the Bible with them, and share the gospel with them and share the love of Christ with them. And then they would continue to follow up with them. So through this, many people have come to faith in Christ, and many people are connected to the local churches, and many people were able to experience the love of Christ both in word and deed from these wonderful Christians.
Yeah, it's amazing. It sounds like the pandemic's really taken a toll on the people over there. So how much fear is there in Russia about COVID at this point? How common is it, and how widespread? How is everyone sort of responding to what you guys are doing?
Well, when it first hit, the reports came out of the larger cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, where it was really difficult to get access to adequate medical care. So there were, lines of people trying to get into the, hospitals that, you'd be sitting in your car for a week before you could get in to be seen. And so there was a lot of panic from that standpoint. But I think the panic has sort of subsided to a certain degree. I think the biggest concern is the state of the economies right now. I just talked to one of my associates in Kiev this morning who indicated that Ukraine has again shut down. The people in Kiev have no access to public transportation, and the businesses have been shut down for the time being. So I think the biggest fear at this point is concern about the economies in those countries, because the economies were pretty fragile, before this happened, and it's rough. And again, during the years under communism, everybody had a safety net, but for the most part, that doesn't exist for most people now.
Yeah, it's so scary, isn't it? I can just imagine, especially in those
Yes, it
areas,
is.
like you were saying. So, I mean, there's many different ways to plant seeds of truth in people's lives. So, what are the primary methods of these Russian Christians? What are they using amid the health pandemic?
Well, again, I think we started out with our campaign, our Christ Over COVID campaign, and we're able to make a number of connections with people that were in need, and we're able to meet those needs. And there was just a tremendous amount of follow-up that took place. But that kind of feeds into our other ministries. So this year, we're raising funds to send roughly 50,000 children to children's camps throughout those countries. Last year, we did roughly 40,000, or the year before, we did roughly 40,000. We have a program called Emmanuel's Child, which is a Christmas celebration, and we equip the churches with Christmas gifts and other resources where the families are invited to these local churches where they celebrate Christmas and they hear the gospel. And this past year we distributed about 40,000 gifts, and we literally saw about a 25% increase in unchurched families who came to the Christmas celebrations because of the contacts that were made through this Christ Over COVID campaign.
Wow.
So we also have a significant compassion ministry where we're ministering to people who are living in the war zone in eastern Ukraine, and both on the Russian side as well as on the Ukrainian side, who have lost everything. So there's many different touch points and there's many different opportunities. But for us, they're doing the work. Through our supporters and our partners, we're providing them with resources so that they can do so much more.
That is just beautiful and fascinating too. Now, are Russians who have grown up in the shadow of communism, are they quite skeptical about religion? Do you get a lot of rejection or a lot of tough questions?
Well, yeah, I think there's always going to be tough questions. But I will say, there was a Pew study that was done recently that simply asked the question throughout the European countries, Russia and Ukraine included, what is the importance of God in your life? Okay. So countries like Spain, they were minus 26 percentage points. Italy was down 21 percentage points. But then when you get to Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine was up 12 percentage points and Russia was up 16 percentage points. So what we're finding is there's a significant growth in the number of people who are indeed interested in spiritual things, because 30 years ago, the wall came down and there was a tremendous amount of hope and optimism that things would change and improve. But in those countries, they didn't see the improvement that they had hoped for and anticipated. So, they tried communism, they tried capitalism, and it's not meeting their basic human needs in many ways, both physically and spiritually. So I think more and more people are really open to the things of God, and the church is really stepping in to meet that need through the love of Christ.
For sure. Now, for those of us who live in the Western world, what can you tell us about the culture and customs within Russia that may differ from our way of life?
Well, one of the most significant differences is that in Russia and those countries, Easter is a much more important holiday than Christmas is. Whereas in our countries, it seems like it's the opposite, because Orthodox Christianity was established back in the 10th century. The resurrection is the most important aspect of the Christian faith. And even during the years under communism, they did allow for the celebration of Easter. And wherever you would go, people, the greeting would be, Christ is risen. And the response is always, it's risen, he is risen indeed, even among the atheists that live in those countries. So it's really embedded in their culture. So I think that's a bit of a difference. But there's just so many differences. I mean, the Russian Christians would always say to me, Michael, we pray for you in America because we know how much more difficult it is to be a Christian in America because of all the distractions that you have. It's like your jobs are more important than your families. And so sometimes because, the kids grow up and one goes to the east, the other goes to the west, and they just don't have that kind of social mobility. And they always say to me, listen, you just have so much and we have so little, but that gives us an opportunity to do what God has called us to do and to reach our nations for the gospel.
Absolutely. That is so interesting to hear that perspective too. It just really kind of drives it home a little bit and makes you think, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It does. It really does. Yeah. Yeah. And they're just so inspiring because those churches are built upon a foundation of great sacrifice, persecution, and martyrdom. And their fathers and their grandfathers and their pastors were taken away in the middle of the night, and they were sent out to Siberia, and many of them perished in the persecution. So that memory is very fresh in their minds, and that's why they realize that this is just a tremendous opportunity that God has opened up for them to reach their nations.
Now, I understand that there's a real problem with Russian orphans, so a lot of orphans in Russia. How many are we talking about, and how are they being cared for?
Well, in Russia, we're talking somewhere between 600 and 700,000 orphans. And there's two kinds of orphans. One, a group of children who lost both parents. But then there are the social orphans whose either one or the other parents are still alive, but they've been taken away from their families due to dysfunction related to violence in the home or alcoholism or drug addiction. So they're put in these children's homes and orphanages, and basically they're put in the homes and they're raised in the homes, and on their 18th birthday they are kind of age out and forced back out in the streets. And many of them end up in a life of crime and prostitution and drug addiction and drug and criminal activity, because the Russian mafia tends to come in and groom them and recruit them. So we have a program called Orphans Reborn. We equip workers to go in every single week, build relationships with the kids, lead many of them to Christ. They all sit through Bible studies and Sunday school when the workers come in, and in many ways they're growing up in a Christian home because the orphan directors love it when the Christians come because of the positive impact that it has on the children in the orphanage itself. And many of the directors have come to faith in Christ as well. So right now we're ministering to about 13 or 14,000 children on an ongoing basis, but that's a small percentage compared to the number of orphans that are in Russia. So it's a tough situation, but we just continue to pray for them, and we're seeing tremendous fruit from this particular ministry.
Yeah, it sounds like a fabulous, fabulous ministry. And we just thank you so much for all the work that you do. And we thank you so much for being with us today, Michael.
Yeah. Can I just point out that we do have an office in Canada, and And you can reach our director's name is Bill Ball. He's a wonderful person, and you can find them at sgacanada.ca.
That's so good. Thank you so much. That's really
Okay, thank
fascinating
you.
work that you do.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful work. It's the Lord's work, and we give him all the credit.
I'm Jeanette Roche. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.